She was born into polygamy. Her family followed the teachings of Joseph Smith, including plural marriage. Like many young girls, she had been promised to a man who was her father's age. But she ran away. She chose hell over a life of polygamy. That girl was me. I was lost, alone, desolate. Then Jesus Christ found me and rescued me. In His love, I found real freedom. He is a shield to all who will take refuge in Him. This is why I can look back and ask, polygamy? What love is this? Welcome to Polygamy, What Love Is This? I'm your host, Doris Hanson, and we continue to probe into the validity of the claims of Joseph Smith's polygamy, which affects the beliefs of the practices of today's polygamists. And before we get started on this show, we would like to let you know that we will help people who want to get out of polygamy. And to find out how we can help you or someone you know who might want to leave, you can call our toll-free number, which is 877-425-9993, and we can discuss your situation. We hold everything in complete confidence or confidentiality. And you can also go to our website, shieldandrefuge.org, to find out more information about us. If you or someone that you know would like to be on our show, if you have a polygamy background and would like to tell about it, we'd be happy to talk to you about doing that too. Or if you have questions about our show, you can email us at email@whatloveisthis.tv. Also, audio versions of this program are now available to download, and you can take it with you. You can find information on how to do that on our website's main page, or you can go to soundcloud.com/What Love Is This? And now I would like to thank our co-host, Earl Erskine, for coming back.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Coming back
Thank you, Doris.
and helping to share all this information that we get together for our viewers.
You do such a good job.
And
I appreciate it.
I appreciate your help as well. You know, we do continue to challenge our polygamous viewers to find where in the Book of Mormon or in the Bible the commands for polygamy or that it helps anyone get eternal life. It was only in the Doctrine and Covenants, actually, where God seemingly changed His mind about polygamy. But since God doesn't change, we can know that His mind on polygamy doesn't change and hasn't changed. In the last 2 weeks, we questioned the idea that the Book of Mormon was the keystone of Mormonism simply because Mormonism's doctrines are not found in the Book of Mormon, remembering that polygamists revere the Book of Mormon as much as the LDS do. This time, we want to look at the anachronisms in the Book of Mormon to further demonstrate that it is not an ancient and honest historical record, and to urge our viewers to search for solid evidence to support what they believe. Those who believe the Book of Mormon cannot also believe polygamy is okay. In several places, the Book of Mormon condemns polygamy except for one very blurry verse.
Yeah.
It uses words to explain polygamy like crimes and abominations and disobedience and cruelty to females to describe the practices of polygamy. Today's show further illustrates that one cannot be a true believer in Mormon teachings or in Joseph Smith and still believe in the historical integrity the Book of Mormon claims. Polygamists and the LDS Church leaders do not encourage members to go outside their belief system for truth. They advise their members to read only faith-promoting material. But truth can stand up against any and every honest test imaginable. So it is to your advantage to step outside the boundaries that have been set by your religious leaders and search for the truth. Today we're going to take another look at the Book of Mormon, this time focusing on the anachronism within its pages. An anachronism is something that's described as being located at a time when it could not have existed or occurred, an artifact or an event or a person or anything else that is not within the time frame in which it is presented. The Book of Mormon has an abundance of anachronisms, lists of which you can easily find on the internet. We're using a very informative webpage, mormonthink.com, as our main source to present these anachronisms, and hopefully our viewers will care enough to check it out and then respond accordingly. You know, Psalm 119:30 has, I've kind of adopted it as a verse for life.
Yeah, it's a good
where
one.
it says, I have chosen the way of truth. And that's what we hope our viewers will also do. Truth needs to be tested. So let's discuss some of the Book of Mormon passages that are historically impossible. The first anachronism is the animals that are referenced in the Book of Mormon, and we'll quote from 1 Nephi.
Yeah. And it came to pass that we did find upon the land of promise, as we journeyed in the wilderness, that there were beasts in the forest of every kind, both the cow and the ox, and the ass and the horse, and the goat and the wild goat, and all manner of wild animals, which were for the use of men.
So here they're using names for these animals. Now, according to Wikipedia on Mormonism, horses are mentioned in the Book of Mormon 14 times and are portrayed as being part of the cultures described. Yet there is no scientific evidence that horses existed on the American continent during the historical years that the Book of Mormon covers. We have another quote.
Scientists say that the modern-day horse did not exist in the Americas during Book of Mormon times. It is universally accepted among mainstream archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians that there is no evidence of the existence of a pre-Columbian horse excepting the long-extinct species.
So horses
From a long time ago.
that were here became extinct, and no horses reappeared until the Spaniards brought them in 1519 by Cortez. Now Columbus brought them to the Bahamas in 1493, but they weren't here on the continent. The LDS explains away this anachronism by saying, well, all the evidence isn't in yet.
Right.
Well, they used that excuse when they claimed that Joseph Smith never had 34 wives and that he married already married women, but the evidence was in a long time ago. And they finally admitted that it was true. Another excuse that they rely upon is, well, the horse in the Book of Mormon wasn't really a horse.
No.
Well, it's probably something else that they called a horse. MormonThink.com is very thorough in their discussion of both sides of the argument, and we suggest you take the time to read their entire article. A summary of their argument goes like this.
Very interesting. If the horse did exist in Mesoamerica during Book of Mormon times, then not a single bone or tooth from any of these horses has ever been discovered, despite the fact that the remains of an abundance of other animals have been discovered in Mesoamerica. And if horses existed in ancient Mesoamerica during the Book of Mormon time period, then despite the fact that ancient Mesoamericans depicted many animals in art and ideology, they never depicted a horse or included the horse in any of their mythology. Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Fascinating.
The evidence that is for or against it. And again, you can go to mormonthink.com and read all the arguments about this. Well, another anachronism is the mention of elephants in the Book of Mormon. We'll read from Ether 9:19.
And they also had horses and asses, and they were elephants and curulams and cumoms, all of which were useful unto man, and more especially the elephants and curulams and cumoms.
Notice that the elephants are mentioned twice in this one verse. Now, evidence indicates that there was a small population of mammoths that survived on St. Paul's Island in Alaska, but that was thousands of years before the recorded times of the Book of Mormon. And scientists have not found any bone, any fossilized evidence of elephant-like animals in the Americas during the Book of Mormon times. Neither are there any cave drawings or other evidence during the purported times of the Book of Mormon that indicates that elephants were especially useful to the Book of Mormon people, as Ether says. Did you know all this while you were...
I'd read that, of course, in there, and I don't know, just brushed it off, I guess, just assumed that, well, they must have been elephants or something.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in there if it wasn't there, huh?
Yeah.
Well, next is the mention of cattle and cows. 6 times the Book of Mormon indicates the use of domesticated cattle. But were there domesticated cattle during that time? We quote.
Again, Mormon think, there has been no evidence recovered that Old World cattle inhabited the New World prior to European contact in the 16th century A.D.
Okay, so of course their answer is that the term cattle could be something else. Don't you love it when they try
It's an easy answer,
redefine their words to solve their problems? They suggest that it's a generic term, maybe for bison or mountain goats or llamas or other known American animals. Yet there's no evidence that the bison was ever domesticated.
No.
In fact, there's no species of goats or deer or sheep or other cattle were domesticated until the Europeans arrived on our continent. It's interesting to note at this point that the spinning of the facts that they are doing merely makes the absence of evidence more obvious. As we investigate these anachronisms, we discover that it is the Book of Mormon that is without evidence, not the Bible.
Well, that's true.
Which they claim the opposite.
Yeah.
The next animal mentioned is goats, but domesticated goats are not native to the Americas.
Domesticated goats are not native to the Americas, having been domesticated in prehistoric times on the Eurasian continent. Domestic goats were introduced on the American continent upon the arrival of the Europeans in the 15th century, 1,000 years after the conclusion of the Book of Mormon, and nearly 2,000 years after they are last mentioned in the Book of Mormon. The mountain goat is indigenous to North America, but it has never been domesticated and is known for being very aggressive.
So we have to question again the accuracy of the claims of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
The next animal is the swine, which the Book of Mormon refers to twice.
And also all manner of cattle and of oxen, and cows and of sheep and of swine and of goats, and also many other kinds of animals which were useful for the food of man.
Now this is in Ether 9:18. I don't think I had that listed on the screen, which I should have done. But if the Book of Mormon wasn't responsible for leading so many millions of people into an eternity without God, the mention of swine being kept by these Jewish people would be almost comical.
Yeah.
Mormon apologists have used various explanations for swine in the Book of Mormon. None of them, however, have any historical or scientific basis. So again, we quote from Mormon Think.
Swine are referred to twice in the Book of Mormon, and the narrative of the Book of Mormon suggests that the swine were domesticated. There have not been any remains, references, artwork, tools, or any other evidence suggesting that swine were ever present in the pre-Entrada New World.
Okay, so again, there's no evidence of the animal that is mentioned in the Book of Mormon. There's a great book entitled Mormon Delusion. There's several parts written by Jim Whitefield, and he's written several parts of this. And so we also are quoting from parts of his book about the animals mentioned in the Book of Mormon. The first quote goes like this.
Somehow, against all the odds, Smith managed to include the major animals that did not exist at all, and exclude the ones that did exist. The list could hardly be more incorrect than it is.
Isn't that interesting? I thought that was as well. The animals that were there aren't mentioned, and the animals that weren't there are. About the swine that the Book of Mormon records, there's no evidence that in Book of Mormon lands or cultures or the time frame they ever had domesticated pigs, especially for food. Again, we quote from Mormon Delusion.
Although domesticated by the Chinese 6,000 years ago, pigs were first introduced to the New World by the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto in 1539, 15 centuries after this comment was supposedly made, at which time pigs would have been completely unknown to Smith's imaginary residual Nephites and Lamanites.
So again, there's no evidence for these Book of Mormon, the record of these particular Book of Mormon animals. And the next one is even more amazing, and that is the mention of lions. We quote from 3rd Nephi.
This is so funny. In 3rd Nephi it says, lions are described as beasts of the forest. Contrary to popular opinion and the Book of Mormon, lions do not live in forests or jungles. They live in savannas and veldts, very few scattered trees, And lions never inhabited the Americas.
Never
Oops.
did. Yeah,
Another
oops.
oops.
Just another fatal flaw
Yeah.
in what is supposed to be the keystone of the Mormon faith. Oh, let's take a look at the agricultural crops that the Book of Mormon mentions, especially or particularly barley and wheat. Were they present in the day, the time, and the place of the Book of Mormon record?
Interesting again. Grains are mentioned 28 times in the Book of Mormon, including barley and wheat. The introduction of domesticated modern barley and wheat to the New World was made by Europeans sometime after 1492, many centuries after the time in which the Book of Mormon is set.
And you know, the normal reader of the Book of Mormon would never
No, you
pick
don't
up on
even
these
think-
things
you don't even
without
think about it.
testing it, without
right.
investigating and checking things out like we always suggest you do. Now, foods that were not and could not have been present are mentioned, and yet many foods that were present during those times, funny, they're not mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Foods like cocoa and squash and tomatoes and potatoes and other crops, they're not even mentioned in the Book of Mormon, but they are indigenous to and we have to ask why.
Why weren't they ever?
And you might ask, is all this important to the discussion of polygamy? Yes, because the Book of Mormon is supposed to be the keystone of the Mormon faith. Yet so little of Mormonism is even in the book. And polygamy is banned in the Book of Mormon. So there's a definite problem either with the book or the religion. It's very important because the religion claims one thing, but the book of the religion claims something else, which makes all of the religion and its author, Joseph Smith, highly suspect. Well, let's talk about corn.
This is fascinating.
It should be mentioned in the Book of Mormon, corn should be, but it's not mentioned. And wine made from grapes should not be mentioned in the Book of Mormon, but it is. Mosiah refers to real wine made from real grapes.
Mosiah 11. And it came to pass that he planted vineyards round about in the land, and he built wine presses, and made wine in abundance, and therefore he became a wine-bibber, and also his people.
Now, this is an anachronism because this isn't true. It's the wrong time, it's the wrong place, and it's the wrong product. So how can so many anachronisms be in a true historical record? Why is there no trace, no evidence of these whatsoever, unless someone just made it all up?
Ooh.
It can't be true.
Could it be?
There are artifacts and events that the Book of Mormon mentions that have never been verified by archaeology or historical investigation since the Book of Mormon was written. These include silk, chariots, the 7-day week, a two-handed steel blade called the scimitar. Is that how you say?
Yeah,
Scimitar?
I'd say scimitar, yeah.
And of course, much, much more. Let's have a quote from the Free Republic.
Silk is erroneously mentioned as being produced in the Americas at that time, both in Nephi, Alma, Ether, and a couple of places in Ether. But silkworm moths had not yet been introduced from Asia. Clothes moths are mentioned in 3 Nephi 13 and 27, yet there were no woolen garments for moths to attack, as sheep had not yet been introduced. Needless to say, clothes moths had not yet been introduced to North America.
So there wouldn't be the moths without the wool, and there wasn't
Called
any wool
clothes
because
moths.
there hadn't been any sheep.
Right.
I mean, it just all comes together and then falls apart. And then, of course, comes the chariots. Chariots are mentioned several times and in many different periods in the Book of Mormon. But archaeologists discover that wheels were not used for travel in pre-Columbian America. Now, the LDS response,
I love this.
this is more than I can handle, is that the ancient Americas may have forgotten that they knew about the wheel, or that it wasn't necessary for chariots to have wheels. Talk about spinning.
Yeah, that's crazy.
My word. We'll quote from MormonThing.com again.
In every instance that the word chariot is mentioned in the Book of Mormon, it is used in conjunction with the word horse. It should be obvious that chariots used in conjunction with horses mean just what you think it would mean, horses pulling chariots.
Well, horses couldn't pull chariots if the horse wasn't really a horse,
That's true.
and if chariots weren't on wheels. I mean,
Yeah.
it just
Couldn't happen.
just can't happen. So their arguments fall apart. Let's look at a very odd event recorded in ether when Shiz's head is cut off.
I've heard an explanation of this from some doctor, but anyway, here we go. And it came to pass that when Coriandamer had leaned upon his sword, that he rested a little, he smote off the head of Shiz. And it came to pass that after he had smitten off the head of Shiz, that Shiz raised up upon his hands and fell, and after that he had struggled for breath, he died.
Now, obviously without the head, which controls the body, which controls our arms and our legs and breathing, this was totally impossible.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard them say, and I don't know if this is what you've heard, that chickens, he was just doing what chickens do when their heads are cut off. You know, they go flap around for several minutes. And
convulsion or reaction.
Right, exactly. And they say that's basically what Shiz was doing. But Shiz wasn't flopping around as a nerve reaction to having his head removed. He actually raised himself up on his hands.
Yeah.
He struggled for breath, and his head's not even on his body. That's impossible. God doesn't write this kind of nonsense.
No.
Is that the explanation you heard?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
That's basically
that it was
what it
just
was?
a physical convulsion or something.
Like a chicken when,
right.
I don't know how many
Their
people
head
have
cut
seen chickens, but
with their head cut off.
Yeah, we did it
But
on
a
the
struggle
farm.
for breath without a body or without a head would be a little difficult.
I mean, yeah, that it can't be done. It's nonsense. Yeah. Well, let's take a look at Book of Mormon medals at this point. Second Nephi.
Just one after the other.
5.
Isn't this, all these are
and
crazy.
there's much more than we're covering too.
But this is good. And I did teach my people to build buildings and to work in all manner of wood and of iron and of copper and of brass and of steel and of gold and of silver and of precious ores, which were in great abundance.
Wow. Okay. So now we do have an abundance of certain things here in America, but at the time of the Book of Mormon times, according to the sciences that have studied Book of Mormon claims, it is erroneous for a book written in the time period of the Book of Mormon to know about the following: bellows, brass and iron, breastplates and copper, gold and silver currency, swords, steel, sackcloth, bushel, fuller's soap, and of course there's many more references that could not have been known about in Book of Mormon times. This is from an article written by a biologist who looked at the Book of Mormon. Even though they try, they cannot honestly explain away the anachronisms in the Book of Mormon, and their explanations are far from accurate or even adequate. Well, we can't go do this without language difficulties.
No.
The Book of Mormon was supposed to be recorded in the language of Reformed Egyptian, yet the Hebrews had not spoken Egyptian since the time of Moses, and language experts tell us there's no record of any language known as Reformed Egyptian. There's geographical difficulties. We quote from 1 Nephi.
It speaks of an Arabian river named Laman that flows continually into the Red Sea. There has been no river whatever in Arabia in recorded history. The numerous descriptions of the Nephites' new land cannot be correlated with any distinct geographic features of Mesoamerica, such as lakes or rivers.
So there have been many geographical difficulties that the Book of Mormon presents, which we don't have time to discuss here, but suffice it to say, there is no geographical evidence for Book of Mormon lands anywhere. And if there were, why hasn't the prophet of the church presented the proof? Isn't that what prophets do?
Yeah.
Why does the Bible overflow with outside evidence, but the Book of Mormon doesn't? We want to conclude with the racism that's in the Book of Mormon, which has never been reconciled. It is explicit about the curse of dark skin. The Book of Mormon teaches that Indians originated from Hebrew settlers in the Americas who wandered away from the Lord. We have some quotes.
1 Nephi 12 says that as they wandered away in unbelief, they became a dark, loathsome, and filthy people. And in 1 Nephi 13, praises future Americans as being white, exceedingly fair and beautiful, like unto my people before they were slain.
Oh, these are awful.
They are.
1 Nephi 5:21, Jacob 3:3-9, and Mormon 5:15-17 say that God cursed the Indians with a dark skin. 2 Nephi 5:23 and Alma 3:6-10 say that anyone who marries an Indian shall be cursed with the same cursing. But time, science, and marriages have proven this to be false. 2 Nephi 30 verses 5 and 7 predicts that when Indians accept the LDS gospel, they will become white. 3 Nephi 2:15 gives supposed examples of this.
And it came to pass that those Lamanites who had united with the Nephites were numbered among the Nephites, and their curse was taken from them, and their skin became white, like unto the Nephites, and their young men and their daughters became exceedingly fair.
Well, several times the Book of Mormon teaches that dark skin is a result of God's curse. But to bring scientific truth to the discussion, the Native Americans are not of Hebrew origin. They are distinctly Mongolian as proven by DNA. And the Mongolian blue spot is the nail in the coffin to the Book of Mormon claims about the origins of the fictitious Lamanites. And American Indians are certainly not born more filthy, loathsome, or ugly than any other people whom God created in His image. Nor is dark skin on any people a curse from God. Most of the resources, this is the end, we don't have time to do it all, but again, you can search this for yourself. Most of the resources were from MormonThink.com, FreeRepublic.com, and Mormon Delusion by Jim Whitefield. I find this extremely interesting.
It is.
It's so much.
Just a little critical thinking about what makes sense, and we just went over it. So,
critical thinking and critical testing. And you know, no evidence, faith based on no evidence is not what God specifically has asked us to do.
That's true.
Says test everything, test it, test it, test it. And it can't be tested.
No.
It cannot be tested. So from the Keystone of Mormonism that we did the last 2 shows, and on this one, you need to test the Book of Mormon claims. Thank you, Earl.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Your help.
Very interesting.
You know, no matter what negative information is discovered about Joseph Smith, his defenders go to great lengths to justify him. They twist and turn and manipulate information in his favor, even to the extent of redefining words and terminology. No man deserves the justification, the loyalty, and defense that Joseph Smith gets. The only person ever born who deserves as much loyalty and faith from anyone was Jesus Christ. Now, we were taught while growing up in a Mormon home not to depend upon the arm of flesh. But that's precisely what Mormonism is all about, following humans who are not and could not be perfect. But Jesus was perfect, and it was Jesus who died on the cross for our sins. So why even bother with Joseph, since Jesus is the only one anyone ever needs? Thank you for watching. God bless.